Hey, and welcome to the third and final talk investigating Genesis 1 and 2. And in the first video, we talked about Christianity versus science and how they're actually not opposed to each other at all. And in the second video, we asked, what is God like through looking at Genesis 1 and 2? And if you want to get caught up in those videos, go back and get caught up right now. Now, in this video, we're looking at the question, what is humanity's purpose? Let's get into it. The question, what is my purpose, is asked by everyone, everywhere. And the idea and the question of ultimate purpose really does need to be satisfied in order for people to actually live a meaningful and satisfying life. People find extremely significant meaning in their family, their work, their hobbies, or different activities throughout their day. But just because those things might be really meaningful doesn't mean they should substitute ultimate meaning and purpose. It's safe to say that since humanity's been conscious, we've been asking the question of ultimate purpose. And it's clear that just through looking around in other people's lives, that we can see that other people lead completely different lives and have completely different purposes. Some purposes are actually contradictory to one another. One person might be leading a life of self-indulgence, while the other person might be leading a life of self-sacrifice. However, people feel deep in their gut that there's a right and proper way to lead one's life, and this is the question of ultimate purpose. Even people who believe that there is no right and proper way for anyone to live their life, that everything's subjective, actually believe that there's a right and proper way for people to live, and that is under their structure that there is no right and proper way for people to live. So we still need to get back at the question of what is the ultimate purpose? What is humanity's ultimate purpose in life? Now let's look at the text. In the last video, we looked at Genesis 1 through 2, and a very particular word, tohu. This word means disorder, chaos, formlessness, voidness, and it is used when God is hovering over the waters of the earth, the Spirit of God that is, and he notices that everything is tohu. It's chaotic, it's disordered. To the early Jewish readers, they would have instantly have known something that we could easily have missed. That this word, when used in different contexts in the Old Testament, is a very specific type of disorder. It's a type of disorder where it is not useful for human flourishing. So what God notices in the first two verses of Genesis 1 is that the earth is not fit for human flourishing. It is tohu. This means before God had even said to create humanity, he had already had humanity on his mind within the very first two verses of the entire Bible. Now, after each day that God creates, he then marks that day by saying, it is good. And what that means is that it is good for human flourishing. Everything that God has just ordered out of chaos is now purposed for human flourishing. This is because humanity is seen as the pinnacle of God's creation. Everything is being purposed for a reason, and that reason is for humans to flourish. And we know this to be the case because on the sixth day, God created humanity, and he said that it is not just good, it is very good. Now in Genesis 2, we see this working out, this playing out of what humanity's very good status is like. God is dwelling with humanity. Humanity and God has complete access to one another. They're in perfect relationship with one another, and things are great. This is very good. This is the opposite of tohu, disorder, chaos. This is order and purpose and meaning and significance. Now let's work out this idea of very good a little bit further. What Genesis 1 and 2 is trying to communicate is that humanity is at its best, it is flourishing the most when it is in relationship with God. It can also be described like this. Humanity's ultimate purpose is to flourish the best they can. And that flourishing happens the best when humanity is in a relationship with God. You might disagree with that, but that's just what Genesis 1 and 2 is trying to communicate. Furthermore, we know that this is the case because in Genesis 3, we see a rift that happens between humanity and God because of the disobedience of Adam and Eve. This rift is the result of sin, and this sin equals death. Humanity between chapters 3 and chapters 10 of Genesis know that something's wrong with them. They know that there is an issue that is deep inside of their soul, and this is best illustrated in chapter 10 in the story of Babel, when humanity tries to reach back up to God using their own strength and their own means. So what is Genesis trying to say? Genesis is trying to say that humans are at their best when they are in relationship with God. As Christians, we know how this story plays out. We know that the redemption story ends with Jesus dying on the cross and being raised again to life so that we can have life once again with God. So we can have an existence like it is in Genesis chapter 2, where God is in complete and perfect fellowship with humanity, and that our ultimate purpose is found in relationship with God through Jesus Christ. Now I know that in the last 3 videos I went through Genesis 1 and 2 relatively quickly, and that was on purpose because I can't cover everything, and we barely scratched the surface of the significance and the importance of just those 2 chapters alone. But there's just one thing I want to leave with you that has to do with all 3 of those videos, and it's that we need to ask the right questions of the text. We need to ask the questions that the text is trying to answer, not our own imported questions from the 21st century. We're gonna find biblical truth only when we do that. Don't forget that if you like this video, hit the subscribe button and let me know. And if this video can help anyone you know, please share it along. And don't forget to live intentionally.